Welcome to Putting It Together, the podcast that goes through the entire body of work of Stephen Sondheim, show by show and song by song. My name is Kyle Marshall, two-time Canadian Podcast Award nominee, and your self-described Sondheim expert. Okay, I need to address something. I made a little huge mistake last week. I'm now calling it affectionately Pattygate. So maybe you remember my guest Matt McClendon making this claim.
She sings, instead of the kind of girl you can't send through the mails, the line in the new version is the kind of stud you can't send through the mails. I don't know what word Patty thinks she's saying, but it is not the word stud.
The kind of stuff you can't send through the mails.
It almost sounds like she's saying stuff, the kind of stuff you can't send through the mails. Listen to it again.
The kind of stuff you
And I know why.
I think maybe that's what I've always thought she did say when I've listened to the new version, to stuff through the mails.
Yeah.
But if it's supposed to be stud, then for sure that's not what it sounds like.
I hope you insert the audio of it.
Yeah, I will. Well, that was wrong. As soon as that episode went live, I got some feedback. On Twitter, @curly_Aaron said, the original lyric is stuff, and I don't think that was changed for this production. @ShutUpLuPone favorited that comment. And then, @CarolynHale86, with photographic evidence, said, in the revised book and lyrics that was published during the West End run of Company, it says stuff. Patty is correct. Now on Instagram, Celine Lemkuel, I'm probably butchering that, said, but stuff is right. In the script, Joanne says stuff, so Patty says/sings what is supposed to be sung. So at that point, my stomach had completely dropped out of my body. How could we have gotten this so wrong? Aussie_world, also on Instagram, followed up by saying, Patty isn't pronouncing it wrong. I've got the complete revised book and lyrics that was published during the West End run. It most certainly is stuff. Well, you can certainly tell me I'm wrong by following @Sondheim Podcast on either Twitter or Instagram, but I need to issue an apology and full retraction. Patty's exonerated. This is the end of Pattygate. She isn't supposed to say stud. It is stuff. She's in the right. But also, this wasn't just me that was on the podcast. Matt was here too. So I got him on the phone. So Matt, explain yourself.
I didn't know. You didn't tell me that was the first thing you were going to say. That's unfair. Okay,
you know what it is. This is such a deep pull that no one is going to understand this reference I'm about to make. But in a way, I feel like I'm Oprah Winfrey and you're James Fry that I'm inviting back onto the show.
I do know that reference.
Yeah,
I read the book back in the day, and
yeah,
like all people, was suckered in by it. So on Twitter, I said, and I will say it again, mea culpa, mea maxima culpa. Look, you haven't made it big until you've pissed off the internet, Kyle. So I think
that's right. That's right.
Thanking me for this controversy. It was actually really funny. Like, obviously, I was totally wrong. That's what I get for using the internet as a source.
That's right. That one source, the internet, I was sure it was going to be right.
Yeah, well, I was using a very popular lyric site that I won't quote since they were wrong in this case, and it felt right to me, and I didn't have the book in front of me, so clearly I was wrong. And so don't trust the internet. Don't get on the wrong side of Patti LuPone fans, because they will tell
they will tell you very clearly that you were wrong, yes.
But you know what? It was actually, look, I love being told when I screw up. I love it. We actually do, on Warped, we do a segment every week called Correction Corner, where we go back and correct things that we said in previous episodes that were wrong. So I'm very comfortable with the idea of being publicly corrected on a podcast. So
and I mean, we're having a little bit of fun with this, but I don't think anybody was like aggressively mean or anything like that. They were just like, you are wrong, and very specifically wrong.
No. Everyone was perfectly polite about it. And I mean, when you make a mistake, you make a mistake. And I do have to say, though, I'm a little upset that it isn't stud, just because I think that word is better there. But
I kind of agree. This is what I've been thinking about. It's like totally like 100% again, wrong. It is actually stuff. It's
Right.
in the official lyrics, but stud does make more sense, doesn't it?
It does. And so I was, in addition to being like, oh, shit, I screwed up, I also was like, no, shit, I kind of wish I was right because I think stud is a little bit better. But, neither of us are Stephen Sondheim, and no one has ever asked me what word I thought should go there. So
That's right. Well, Matt, thank you for coming back on and kind of going over, expressing your remorse of leading people astray. I guess while you're here, one more time, what is your podcast and how can people find you?
it is called Warped, the completely unnecessary Star Trek podcast. It is available on iTunes and all of your standard podcast services have it. You can find us on Twitter at Warped Trek, and I am at Host Warped. And listen, I just had one more thing I wanted to tell you.
Sure.
We talked about this a little bit on Twitter. There's no such thing as bad publicity. So if you ever have me on again, if you have me on again next season for Follies, I will make up a bunch of lies about Yvonne DiCarlo for you.
Yeah, exactly. Born in 1889. Yeah.
Exactly.
Now, I also complained that Sondheim uses males to rhyme with tails in the song Do I Have a Girl for You? I thought this was completely unrealistic because who says males? Well, according to M. Stone Hennessy on Twitter, it's from the Comstock Act, repealed in 1965, that made it a federal crime or offense for anyone to use the United States males to transmit obscene materials. Susanna, a former guest on this show, also chimed in with her knowledge as a historian by letting me know that it makes the line more perfect because the person they're talking about is too sexual to be sent through the mails. So that entire line is about obscenity laws that were changing during the 1960s and would absolutely have been in the public consciousness in 1970. Although I still don't really love the line, but it certainly makes more sense. So thank you to everyone who sent feedback. You can also do that by sending an email to puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com. You can also help me and allow me to do more research by going to my Patreon page. There's a link to that in the show notes. Right now, you can hear some unaired audio from Matt's apology and my conversation with Federico before we officially started the show. And now it's time for Plodding Along. This is the part of the show where I fill you in on what is going on with the plot of the show. Nothing has happened since last week. After Have I Got a Girl for You, the husbands leave the stage and Bobby stays alone while he sings Someone is Waiting. Let's thank some sponsors, and when we return, we'll talk about the song Someone is Waiting with Federico Tedeschi. Putting It Together is a proud member of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB. The Alberta Podcast Network promotes and supports Alberta-made podcasts and connects their audiences with Alberta-based businesses and organizations. The Alberta Podcast Network is also a sponsor this week, so let's hear from one of our many great shows.
In the modern world, for men, modern society has created a reawakening of the question, what does it mean to be a man? It is not as clear-cut as it once was, and the answers are as varied, infinite, and complex as can be. This is where the podcast Modern Manhood comes in. Join me, Herman Villegas, as we explore how the different views of masculinity shape our daily life. For example, how the way we date, parent, school, and play are affected by the many shapes modern masculinity has its handle on us. This is the lives of men, as flawed, authentic, and complex as can be. This is Modern Manhood, a proud podcast of the Alberta Podcast Network, powered by ATB.
This week, Putting It Together is also brought to you by ATB. Are you an Albertan that's aged 20 to 55? Are you educated? And are you motivated by new experiences like travel? Do you want to optimize spending to support that travel? And do you want to start saving and watch it grow? Well, by going to atb.com/deposit, you might be able to do all of those things and maybe just a little bit more. You can turn your deposits into a dream experience. You can also win a chance to get $50,000 every month. And this is not just another bank promotion because, as you have heard on this show before, ATB is not just another bank. This is how they reward customers every single month. So go to atb.com/deposit to see how you can start to motivate yourself now.
Someone is waiting, cool as Sarah, easy and loving.
Federico Tedeschi, thank you so much for joining me here again.
Thank you for having me again.
Because you've been here so often, I guess we should start with what you've been up to since the last time you were on.
Okay, so last time we talked was like back in April.
Yeah.
And I just graduated back then. Now I consider myself a full-time private teacher of what I graduated to, which is ancient literature and ancient languages. So Latin and Greek.
And I think too, when you were on, you mentioned that you were going in for, was it like a dissertation or an argument or something? I think you were going into, it was like your final exam or something like that.
I just had it. Yeah, back then when we last talked, I just had it like a month earlier, and it went pretty well.
Oh, good. And so has teaching been going well, I guess, for you in these last few months?
It actually has been quite rewarding, actually, because it's always fine when you tutor a student and that student actually does some progress, and it's rewarding for you and for him, of course.
Right.
Because it means you're good.
I'd also assume, having dabbled myself in teaching things and different topics, I find that you also strengthen your own knowledge in the thing that you're teaching, because you kind of have to be the authority in a way, but you are always going to be asked questions that I've never thought about that way, or that sort of thing. So I think there's always this joy of discovery, even as for being a teacher.
You always get to know more about anything, about the person you're talking with, or about themes and whatever, like books and films that you never thought about, because you're having a conversation basically, and knowledge comes from conversation, I believe.
Yeah.
Rather more than books and anything else. When you speak to someone, even though it's like a 16 years old boy, you get to know more about his reality, and he gets to know more about yours. And it strengthens you, and you become more knowledgeable.
Well, that's why I started this podcast, so I didn't have to pay tuition to go and learn about music theory.
Yeah, that's the good thing about this podcast, because I know Sondheim as much as you, and as much as anybody who's been on the show. But there are those particular shows that you never listen to, like again, Anyone Can Whistle, or Do I Hear the Walls, or even in Primrose. I just listened to your last episode.
Yeah.
It was amazing, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
And if you know Sondheim, you listen to the episodes of your show, and you say, okay, I know this song, but you still get to know more about this song. You still get to know what other people think about the song, and I constantly find myself thinking, oh, I never thought about that. And that's like the great thing about this show and conversations in general.
That's always was my favorite thing about doing this, is that there's sometimes a song that I'm like, I kind of know what this is all about, and then someone will bring up a different interpretation. I'm like, oh, that makes way more sense, actually. That's cool that you brought that up. Yeah.
That's the thrilling part.
So I'm curious then how you first came across Company.
Okay, so I came across Company when I was like 16, and I knew Sweetheart by heart, and I loved every minute of it. And I said, okay, let's find out more about this composer. So I said, okay, let's find the first show of that decade, and that was Company.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to it, and I thought, I don't like this.
Thank you for being honest. That's good.
Yeah, because I was 16.
Yeah.
And this show is about. I didn't speak English very well back then, but So I didn't actually listen. Sorry, I didn't actually understand what this show was about and the themes that we're talking to, because I was too young actually. And I said, okay, I don't like this show. Let's find out something else. And I found out that A Little Night Music was a thing. So I said, okay, let's try this one. And I really liked that one.
Okay.
But I said, okay, a couple of years later, I said, okay, let's go back to Company. And I started studying Company. And I fell in love with it because it's a beautiful show. It's the first show that I think Sondheim actually had fun writing.
Yeah, you can really, really tell that this is truly Sondheim coming into his own, or like at his highest powers. I mean, the whole 70s is such a great period for Stephen Sondheim's output, to be honest.
Great decade.
I think he still has this love affair with Anyone Can Whistle, but that was like it's a very troubled production the entire run through, and all 9 performances that it got to be seen on Broadway. Yeah. And then Do I Hear a Waltz was just an awful experience for every person involved with it. So I think he's coming back to Broadway after like 5-6 years off and being like, okay, like we have a competent creative team and we're all on the same page. And so it's just, it's a wonderful show for him to come back to Broadway with.
Yeah, it's like, and history repeats itself because that's what will happen 10 years later with Merrily.
I know. I will say though, I mean, we will get to experience Merrily We Roll Along in 20 years from now when the movie version comes out. So hopefully.
And I can't wait, even though I have to wait 20 years.
I know. I look at it, it's like, oh, I'm going to be so old when that movie comes out. But oh well.
I may not even like it anymore.
Yeah, maybe it's like, I'm so over Merrily. It's
who cares?
Okay, so you came back to it and started to love it. One thing that I've noticed for myself, and I don't want to project this on you necessarily, but one thing I've found for myself with Company is it's a show that as I get older, I actually start to resonate with it even more so.
Yeah, exactly.
So
that was my point as well. Even though I was like 18 or 19 when I got back to it, I said, okay, this is a show about adult people, and I don't consider myself an adult person, but I think this is what I will experience, in a couple of years. So let's get accustomed to it.
Right. Okay. Well, so let's talk about being lonely and depressed for the next 20 minutes.
Yeah, beautiful. You get to sing beautiful songs.
That's right. Well, yeah. Okay. Let's jump into it here then. The song we're talking about is "Someone Is Waiting." This is the 6th song, I guess, depending on how you want to look at things, that shows up here in the show. But this is Bobby's first true his own song. He's not singing with anybody else on stage. It's just him alone and singing this song. I say him, although again with the latest rendition being a gender reversal, I should say him or her. To that point, the 3 productions that we're talking about, the original Broadway cast starred Dean Jones as Bobby. The 2006 revival starred Raúl Esparza, and then the 2018 London revival starred Rosalie Craig, just to kind of give credit where credit is due. And this is how the original Broadway cast starts off. Bobby/Robert says, "Someone is waiting, cool as Sarah, easy and loving as Susan, Jenny. Someone is waiting, warm as Susan, frantic and touching as Amy, Joanne."
Someone is waiting, cool as Sarah, easy and loving as Susan, Jenny. Someone is waiting, warm as Susan, frantic and touching as Amy, Joanne.
Okay.
That's where we start off with. I just want to, right here from the very beginning, what are your initial thoughts on this first introduction to the song?
This goes back to when I first listened to it, and I thought, this song is boring.
You're just listing people. What's going on?
Yeah, Sondheim loves lists.
Yeah.
This one is very boring, I thought back then. But then when I studied company, because I only listened to the original cast recording, and I thought, okay, this is a musical, so there's a plot, there's a linear story. A character comes and finds conflict, and he gets to resolve it at the end. And I looked up on Wikipedia and read to the synopsis. I said, okay, this show doesn't have a plot.
Right.
And so I thought, when does the whole thing happen? The whole show, the songs. When do they happen? There is no connection apparently between the songs in terms of plot. I said, okay, if Sondheim wrote it like this, there must be a reason. And I sat down and I said, okay, let's listen to this song. And I fell in love with it because, as I told you a couple of minutes ago, this is the song that actually, for me, expresses the conflict in the story, in the plot. Whereas the previous ones, like Have I Got a Girl for You, You Would Drive a Person Crazy, Sorry Grateful, The Little Things You Do Together, they don't express that conflict that's inside Bobby.
When you approach the show, I think the one thing, if you only know it from the album itself, if you're listening to this as an album, it is really difficult to really piece together what the plot actually is.
It's a catalog of songs, basically.
And you have had the benefit of actually having Wikipedia when you first listened to this. I did not have the benefit of having Wikipedia when I first listened to this album. So I was kind of lost. I'm like, who are these people he's talking about? Of course, if you're...
what does he want from him?
Yeah, I mean, as you... get into it or have seen a production, it would make a lot more sense, of course. But other than that, it just seems like he's just listing random people that he wants to be with.
Yeah, and that's that beautiful, beautiful pro shot of the Raúl Esparza production that I think it's the definitive production, because that's the one I love the most.
I want to point out a couple of different things that Sondheim does in this first opening bit, which is, you'll notice that he interplays two things. Number one, he uses Susan twice. So he mentions Susan twice in this opening. First as easy and loving as Susan, and then later on warm as Susan. But also, there's like this, I don't know, difference between Sarah and Susan, because earlier he says cool as Sarah and then warm as Susan later on in the same kind of stanza going on. So he's definitely having a little bit of fun here, playing off not just the names, but also the imagery, I guess, that he's using at the same time.
Yeah, and again, this is conflict. So cool as Sarah and warm as Susan, they are conflicting images. And it's just beautiful. And I think that Sondheim plays on the word Susan. Well, it doesn't actually play on the word. It just uses it very often, because the S sound is more involving. Try to think about it. When you hear a song that contains a lot of S sounds,
right,
they tend to, involve you more. I don't know if you get what I mean.
No, I get it. I think that the biggest thing here, too, is that there's all of these conflicting messages that he's trying to bring out here, because not just like the warm and cool, but it's like, I want someone that's easy and loving, but also someone who's frantic and touching. Right? Yeah. So it's like, I think we've been there before. Sometimes when we're trying to make choices, whether it's relationships or even something maybe not as important as that, it's like, I want something like this and this, even though those are two very separate things.
Yeah, I think this is like fear put to words.
I think that's a great way to explain it.
It's the fear we get to experience every day. It's not like, oh, we are in a wood and there probably are wolves and everything like into the woods.
Right.
This is everyday. This is everyday fear.
Yeah, fear of like missing out, or like, if I have this thing, then I won't have that thing over there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This is why I love this song, because it's so human.
And I also kind of like that he just ends off by just saying Joanne. Like, there's no modifiers. It's just like Joanne. We all know Joanne, right?
Yeah, exactly. You saw her in The Little Things You Do Together.
Right.
Even though she's not a character in that particular scene, she sings the song, and you got to know her. You got to know her character. I don't know if you ever watched Arrested Development.
I did, yeah.
Yeah, she's like Lucille Bluth. This
Right,
character,
right.
this amazing character, a funny one, but also kind of cruel.
I don't know who that is, and I don't care to find out.
And say, okay, you know Joanne. So even if I just say Joanne, you know what I mean.
Exactly.
She doesn't need descriptions or anything.
She defies description almost, yeah.
Yeah.
I do want to point out too, and it could just be me making this up a bit, but I really do feel like the way he sings Joanne is very, very similar to the way Joanna is sung in Sweeney Todd. Like it's the same inflection, it's the same almost note to my ears.
Joanna.
I don't know if that was him cribbing himself later
One
on or
syllable
what.
less. I think that probably Sondheim loves this name.
Yeah. It's just like who did he mention? Oh, it's Arthur Lawrence, like his collaborator, in like 3 shows had someone called June. Yeah, so he's like June 3 times in 3 separate shows. So it's just a name that he likes to go back to.
It's like the word hat.
Right.
For him.
Yeah.
It's one of those challenging names, challenging sounds, because I don't think that they are easy to rhyme with.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess it gives you 2 strong, I don't know, like vowels to sing. It's like the Joe that you can lengthen in the An, because the at the end isn't, you can't really sing that. It's like a hard consonant that you can't really sing melodically. So we mentioned about how the 2018 version did the gender swap of Bobby, which means that they kind of have to change this song quite a bit in order to fit it. So, although I would say it would have actually made it even more interesting to me if they kept it the same and she was singing about the women still. I just think that would be an interesting take, but they didn't do that. So here's how they change it. And I would assume, although I don't actually know this for a fact, but I would assume that Sondheim had some say as to what the lyrics actually changed to. But here's how it's different. So in the 2018 version, she sings, "Someone is waiting, sweet as David, funny and charming as Peter, Larry. Someone is waiting, cute as Jamie, sassy as Harry, and tender as Paul."
Someone is waiting, sweet as David, funny and charming as Peter, Larry. Someone is waiting, cute as Jamie, sassy as Harry, and tender as Paul.
So that's what the first section sounds like. And like I said, like it kind of does change a few things. They're still playing with the differences. Like I want someone who's funny, but also someone who's sassy, someone who's tender, but also I care about them being cute. Like there is this kind of interplay back and forth.
Yeah, and Harry, if I got that right.
Yeah.
Harry.
I know for a fact, because of different reasons, that I don't think you're like the biggest fan of the 2018 version.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe you can just expand on that a little bit in relation to this song.
Sure. Now, I don't want to sound wrong because I'm not wrong, but I think that Company is a very masculine show. It's a story about a man and how he lives relationships at the end of the 60s and beginning of the 70s, about that conflict that we just talked about. So I think that setting this show in contemporary world, gender swapping it, I think it kind of changes the meaning completely. Now, I'm not saying that changing the meaning of show is wrong. It's just that it's different. And being different, you implicitly get to choose which one is the better version for yourself. And I think that being a male, the original one is more I can relate myself to it more.
Gotcha.
And if they wanted to do something different, but still in the spirit of the show, I think that a more interesting choice would have been the original one, which was an all-male production. That would have been more interesting. You know, there was this rumor back then that Alan Cumming was to be involved in a all-male production of Company, which would have been interesting, I think, because it kept that masculinity vibe of the show. Would have tried to tell something new, something different. I don't know what you think about it.
Well, the hard part is that I have not seen it. Like it's hard now because I've recorded all these episodes out of order, so I can never remember where I actually mentioned different things.
Okay.
But the one criticism I have, because I've only listened to the soundtracks or the cast albums, is that I feel that however they recorded the 2018 version, whoever did it didn't do a great job, because I find that
it doesn't sound well.
full and rich. Like I find, like, even though they reduced the amount of instruments on stage, how the 2006 version still sounds like really phenomenal to me. However, anyone who has gone and seen it, and I've talked to a few people who actually were in London and got to see a production of this, like, love it. Like, they think it was great. Like, it sounded good. So I really want to try and travel to New York when it comes out in March.
Yeah, it's coming on Broadway.
And watch it just so I can have like a very clear like interpretation. But as an album, yeah, I'm probably always going to go and choose the original Broadway cast for the most part, and dabble it in here and there.
Or Elaine Stritch.
Well, I mean, who can beat Elaine Stritch, really, at the end of the day?
Yeah, no one.
Here's what the second stanza goes like. So Bobby continues, would I know her, even if I met her? Have I missed her? Did I let her go? A Susan sort of Sarah, a Jenny-ish Joanne. Wait for me, I'm ready now. I'll find you if I can.
Would I know her, even if I met her? Have I missed her? Did I let her go? A Susan sort of Sarah, a Jenny-ish Joanne. Wait for me, I'm ready now. I'll find you if I can.
What really draws me into these lyrics here is that I think the recurring thing that people agree with here, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that Bobby is not necessarily defined super well. Meaning, like, he or she is a bit of a blank canvas, and I think whoever is watching is bringing their own baggage and interpretation to the role a little bit, where it's like Bobby really is the cipher for the audience itself. And what that means is that when I watch this and when I hear that lyric, I'm like, ugh, like, hits me right in the gut. Because it's like, I have been in that exact situation before, where it's like, have I waited too long? Maybe I'll never find the person that I'm looking for. I am just going to die alone and unloved type of thing, which I think is what he's truly worrying about here. And then he starts to kind of list out, well, maybe I'll try and find this combination of like the perfect person.
Yeah, it's like Frankenstein.
Right.
You know, I try to create the perfect woman for me. You know, a Susan sort of Sarah, Jenny-ish Joanne. So parts of the woman he knows. Yeah, being lonely is a very contemporary theme, and even though Bobby has company, because again the show is called Company,
right,
he's alone. He has friends. He has I wouldn't say girlfriends, but he has women. But he's alone, and this explains why, because he still hasn't found the woman he actually needs, because he's very undecided. He wants something. You know that. I think you know that feeling. Yeah. You want something, but you want it just the way you want it, and you never actually find it, because perfection doesn't exist.
Right. It's you're being like almost a little bit selfish in that
Yeah,
goal.
yeah.
And I wish I knew more about, I guess, the 70s themselves, because I'm curious if this was something that society at large was dealing with, or if Sondheim and his collaborators were just like ahead of the game a little bit. Because I find that having like this man at the center being like, hey, you know what? Yeah, I'm surrounded by people and I'm going out on dates, but I'm still like super incredibly alone in this world. And I think that's something that still translates today, which I think is why Company can still be put on, even if it's set in the 70s or updated to a modern day setting. It still works because we get that. What jumps to my mind specifically is that this is also kind of the feeling if you've ever used like a dating app at all, whether it's Tinder or whatever, which is like, oh, there's going to be someone even more perfect right around the corner. Yeah, I've matched with someone, but they only like tick off like 7 out of 10 of the things that I want. I'll probably find a 9 out of 10 here later on. So you're constantly searching for that thing that's going to meet all your needs, and being surrounded by all these options, but still feeling like you are with nobody.
It's like being at a supermarket. You walk down the aisles and you look at products and say, okay, I want this, but I want it a little bit more like this other thing. So you're like choosing the product, and it's this.
It's like the few times I ever buy potato chips for myself, it's like, I don't want the big bag, but I don't want the small bag. I want something that's in between these two.
Yeah, I don't want to feel fat.
Right.
Can we talk about just how beautiful the music is in this second stanza? It's, someone is waiting, it's beautiful. But this one, would I know her even if I met her? This part has, I think, some of the most beautiful Sondheim music he's ever written. Now, I can't sing because I am like a really bad singer, but this one is the one I go to when I listen to the song, and like I am by myself and I can sing out loud. This is the bit that I burst.
Yeah, I mean the strings and stuff that are going on behind him when he sings, it is like, it does sound sorrowful behind him, right? Like it just adds to that emotion that they want the audience to feel. And because Bobby is alone on stage for this, I think it adds to that feeling as well. The whole like, would I know her even if I met her? That is in and of itself just like, oh, that's a really strong. If someone just said that out loud, that would work as like a piece of dramatic text. But having it be sung, I think actually does add to that.
And with Company, I think the staging is very linked to the show. How it's staged. It's very important, because
I wish I could have seen what the original staging looked like, because they had like this glass elevator in the center that they kept going up and down with, and I've never really seen the concert versions of this. Oh, and the Raúl Esparza one too.
Okay, have you ever seen the documentary for the original cast recording?
I have, yes.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It makes me sad because that documentary proves that I think that they should have continued on with that show, because I would love to actually see that now, like all the classic albums from the 70s. Like, what was that recording session like? I also think that they could make that show today with all the new Broadway shows. Like, I want to see what that recording session looks like.
And that it's ironic, because that show, that documentary is about a very iconic cast recording, even though back then it wasn't.
No, that's
iconic.
True. That's true.
It became iconic. So you watch that and you say, oh, that's Elaine Stritch having a tantrum. That's beautiful. That's Sondheim smoking. Oh, like, he smokes a lot.
It's like he must have smoked like 2 packs of cigarettes that day. Like he's just like sucking them back.
But looked very good doing it.
Yeah, with his, I don't know, that weird hair that he had in the 70s and the beginning part of the 70s is always weird to me to go back to. But like him and Hal Prince are just like, just like 2 peas in the pod. So the other thing that I think that we kind of mentioned before we started recording here too was how this song kind of signals a lot of other songs that come later in the show. definitely the one that jumps to mind here is like the Wait For Me, I'm Ready Now. Like that's said exactly the same way and sung exactly the same way in Marry Me a Little, which happens a few songs after this one. One of the things that you kind of mentioned here is how this is kind of this song that's here in the first act, but really is like foreshadowing other songs that come later, and is really this story song about like going from like this loneliness all the way to hopefully feeling connected later on in the show. Like it starts here almost in this song.
You mentioned that there are also references to being alive. I think these three songs, Someone Is Waiting, Marry Me a Little, and Being Alive, is the trio that tells the story. Otherwise, it's just the other songs are descriptive songs. You know, they describe a situation. Now, they are very Sondheim-ish, Sondheim-esque songs, because, you know, they aren't just there for applause. They are there to tell the story, to tell a story. But these three songs, they tell the story. They tell the story of Company, and they tell the story of Bobby, whereas the other songs tell a story. They tell the story of Joanne. They tell the story of Larry. They tell the story of whoever. There are too many names.
I know. I can never keep track of all the names that are in this show.
David and Larry. That is a beautiful song, but that doesn't describe what the story of Bobby is. That song describes the story of Harry and David.
This is the question I've asked a few different people here, at least, is do you look at Company as being these events are happening in exactly this order, or are we just seeing random moments from Bobby's life so that when he eventually comes to that realization and being alive, that it's like, okay, all these thoughts that he's had going on, boom, now we're going into being alive because it's all been leading to this moment anyways. Do you have any idea about that?
I don't know how it was back in the 70s, but I based my thoughts on the 2006 revival, which has the framing device of the birthday party.
Yeah,
that is like the main plot. There's this party. He's turning 35.
35.
And the whole show basically tells that story. But in the meantime, Bobby thinks about his previous experiences in no particular order, I think. And at the end of the show, I always think about like he leaves the party by himself, even though it's his party. He leaves the party and he goes out and sings "Being Alive." That's like my headcanon for the show. But I think that all the songs they tell precise moments in a random order, even though it's not random. But you get the feeling of randomness because that's how we think. You know, we think randomly. We don't think in order. This is a great show because of that. Because George Firth and Sondheim tried to create a show that like describes how we think when. Let me rephrase that. Have you ever been at a party and you're thinking, "Oh my God, I am so bored," or and you keep thinking about something else? What you think about doesn't have an order. You know, it's like, you see something, you think about something else, and you see a situation, you think about a situation you maybe lived years before or months before, and I think that this show does that. You know, Bobby is at his party and he sees his friends and he thinks about the previous experience he's had with them, even though he keeps thinking about how lonely he is. You know, he's surrounded by his friends, but he's lonely.
You know, this thought just jumped into my head right now. I haven't really been thinking about this before, but it's interesting how much Sondheim kind of returns back to this well of like memories and how those kind of help form us later on. Like Merrily We Roll Along is probably the best example of that, of like these snatches of stuff that are going on through our lives and stuff like that. Like even Follies to an extent, right? They're thinking back to a time that they existed and now that's informed their life here now. So it seems to be something that he kind of goes to. And it's also, I mean, talking about the movie version of Merrily We Roll Along. Richard Linklater, who's going to be directing that movie, did another movie called Boyhood here a few years ago, which took him 9 years to film. And what was interesting about that movie, for me at least, and why I like it so much, I think, is like you're seeing this person's life over 9 years, and it's not necessarily like the most important things in their entire life that we're seeing, but it's kind of how we sometimes think about our lives, these snatches of like, oh, remember that time I was on the bicycle talking with this person, or like, remember coming home from graduation and the conversation I had with my parents there, and like, so they're just grabbing these like random things. And I think this is almost how the show is structured, which is like these snatches that are going all around, that is kind of building up to the moment of realization, or building up to how Bobby is going to live the rest of his or her life. It's not just like this big realization that he comes to. It's all of these things together help build the person.
Yeah. And they are everyday events, you know. They are all dinner parties, unless I'm mistaken. You know, they happen constantly, especially if you're an adult. So and they are all moments where he thinks he's lonely. You know, the little things you do together.
Right.
That song, that number is funny as hell, but it's a very sad moment for Bobby, because he sees two of his friends having something in common, even though it's you know, it leads nowhere, but he thinks, okay, I want that.
Yeah, it's also kind of why I tend to really love the way that Raúl Esparza portrays Bobby. Although I've had people that don't, but why I like it, there's like this almost sadness in his eyes the entire time. So it's like, oh, I feel for him. And then
and even when he tells the jokes,
right,
he's very sad.
Right, it's like oh, am I supposed to laugh? Okay, so going on. The next stanza goes, someone will hold me, soft as Jenny, skinny and blue-eyed as Amy, Susan. Someone will wake me, sweet as Amy, tender and foolish as Sarah, Joanne.
Someone will hold me, soft as Jenny, skinny and blue-eyed as Amy, Susan. Someone will wake me, sweet as Amy, tender and foolish as Sarah, Joanne.
So, I mean, Joanne stays the same, where she's like the ending of that, where it's like, you know, Joanne, right?
Yeah, because
we've seen her. But what I think is interesting here is that oftentimes we've mentioned here on this show how when characters sing about their love of a character, that sometimes really usually rejects doing the standard like, oh, you're so beautiful. Like they can only mention about things that they've observed and stuff. Here's one of the exceptions where he explicitly states, I want someone skinny and blue-eyed as Amy, right? But I also want someone as sweet as Amy, is what he says later on in the same stanza. So it's like the actual physical, but also the actual personality of the person. And then I also think it's interesting how this contrasts with what he said before, because with Sarah, he says cool as Sarah in the first stanza, and here it's tender and foolish as Sarah. So again, he's playing with these different character traits, I guess, of the same people.
And I think that the interesting bit is always the end of the stanza, which is Joanne, because at the end of the show we will find out that maybe Bobby and Joanne had some kind of relationship.
Right. Yeah.
So, you know, he or she keeps thinking about how she or he wants the perfect girlfriend or boyfriend, but at the end of the day, he's in love with Joanne, I believe.
Oh, well, here's the next question then I'll have for you, because I like to ask this of the guests here this season is, do you think that, you know, after Being Alive happens, that Bobby actually ends up with any of the people that we have seen in the show?
No. I don't think that he does that, because maybe Joanne, maybe. The three girlfriends of You Could Drive a Person Crazy, that trio. They all leave him, and the other women, they are all married to his friends. And so is Joanne, but she's a little bit, she doesn't really care about marriage or weddings because she's done it 3 or 4 times.
Right.
So I think that maybe the only possible woman would be Joanne, but I don't think that at the end he ends up with any of them. Because, again, he doesn't want any of them except maybe Joanne. Because he wants someone who's easy and loving as Susan, frantic and touching as Amy, skinny and blue-eyed as Amy. Again, not them, but parts of them. And maybe at the end he ends up with someone, hopefully, who's just what he needs. Or maybe he just die alone. I don't know.
Maybe he does. No, I tend to agree. I don't think that he does end up. That's my own headcanon for this, is that he goes to someone else. Like, he uses all this knowledge of these relationships and what his friends have told him to go out and actually find someone that's going to be his partner, sort of thing.
Maybe they are all excuses for not be actually involved in a relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be involved in a relationship because I want someone just like this.
Mm-hmm.
And like, you think perfection doesn't exist, so you have to challenge yourself. You don't have to find excuses for not challenging yourself. And this is Bobby trying to find excuses for not challenging himself. That's maybe another interpretation.
One thing I do love about these lyrics here in this stanza specifically is, again, the foreshadowing that it has. Someone will hold me, someone will wake me. So when we get to being alive, it's like, I want someone to hold me too close. I want someone to ruin my sleep, right? Those are the two big ones that he sings about. And this is like mentioning those very topics here early on. I just like so much how these kind of songs tie each other together.
They are the songs that tie the show together. Mm-hmm. Because otherwise it's just they are just vignettes of events of his life. But these three songs tie the show together and make it a single experience and a single story. And they are 3 beautiful songs.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to read out here what the lyrics are actually in the 2018 version, which is, someone will hold me strong as David, silly and solid like Peter, Larry. Someone will wake me warm as David, loyal as Harry, and loving as Paul.
Someone will hold me strong as David, silly and solid like Peter, Larry. Someone will wake me warm as David, loyal as Harry, and loving as Paul did.
Now, here's my criticism here again, I guess. Ruin it's like we had about this song in particular in the 2018 version, where I actually think most of the other updates work pretty well in the 2018. 2 things. Number 1, equating the Larry character with the Joanne character, because they're switching basically everyone's partner and putting them into this song here. I don't buy that necessarily. I don't like Larry's a kind of a fun character, but even Joanne kind of forgets about him sometimes that he's even there. Yes. So I don't know. It feels weird to have that same connection with this character when he just does not have the same stage presence as what Joanne has.
It's like a lazy rewrite, I think.
Yeah, I would have honestly left it as Joanne. This is my continued thing about I wish they had just made her bisexual in this show. But anyways, that's a whole other thing.
And she's played by Patti LuPone in
Joanne
London.
Is, yeah.
Yeah, so why not keep Joanne?
Yeah, right.
But I like that whoever wrote the lyrics switched the features she looks for in a man with, male features.
Yeah.
Because it would have been weird for like to find someone who's skinny and blue-eyed in a man. She says strong. Am I wrong? Well, what
No,
are the
she
lyrics?
says silly and solid instead of skinny and
Silly and
blue-eyed.
solid.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there was as strong as
Strong as David.
strong
Yeah.
as what strong as David. So they switched the features.
Yeah.
Which is fine, I guess.
I don't know if it was meant to be like this, but my interpretation is that was like a happy accent that they could say strong as David because of the biblical implications that has. But
and it's the Jewish one. Am I right?
Right.
Am I wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Uh,
I think myself a Jewish.
the only thing that I'll push back on a little bit is that what I like about the original lyrics is how they do play with the differences of the characters, because, well, I guess I don't know. It's funny and charming as Peter in the first stanza, and then silly and solid like Peter later on. But Harry is sassy as Harry and tender as Paul, and then later loyal as Harry and loving as Paul. But tender and loving are basically the same thing, or very fairly close. Sassy and loyal, I guess, are somewhat different. Anyways, I just feel that, I mean, I'm sure they didn't just write this in a day or something, but
but
a couple more passes to just make this like really feel great.
Yeah, basing my assumptions on just what you just said, I don't think that Sondheim wrote that.
Yeah,
and you
no
like
idea.
the original one because Sondheim wrote that.
Right. Here is how the song ends here then. So Bobby sings, "Did I know her? Have I waited too long? Maybe so, but maybe so has she. My blue-eyed Sarah, warm Joanne, sweet Jenny, loving Susan, crazy Amy, wait for me. I'll hurry, wait for me. Hurry, wait for me. Hurry, wait."
Did I know her? Have I waited too long? Maybe so, but maybe so has she. My blue-eyed Sarah, warm Joanne, sweet Jenny, loving Susan, crazy Amy, wait for me. I'll hurry, wait for me. Hurry, wait for me. Hurry, wait for me.
Which is
Just
great. This
beautiful.
is like classic
Yeah.
Sondheim for two different reasons. One, like ending like almost in the middle of a sentence, which he likes to do every so often, but also those two very different impulses, right? That he likes to go back and forth between hurry, wait, right? He's really using that effectively here.
Yeah, and the play on I'll hurry and the play on hurry. So it's
Right.
like I'll hurry, but you have to hurry too.
Right.
It's just it's so Sondheim.
The weird thing about this stanza in particular is that the way that it's written in this Finishing the Hat book only actually happens in the 2006 version, the way that it's written out here. The original Broadway cast and the 2018 revival actually, instead of ending with wait, they end with wait for me again. So I don't know why that necessarily is, but that is the truth.
But we can speculate. I think that first of all, I think that when Finishing the Hat was published, the 2006 revival was the
most recent. Well, yeah, it would have been the most recent
the canonical one.
So I don't think even the Neil Patrick Harris one would have happened yet. I don't think.
No, I don't think.
Let me check the copyright,
so
but I'm pretty sure I'm right.
Yeah.
yeah. The Neil Patrick Harris one would have come out the following year. So.
Okay, so that one was the most recent one and the canonical one, I would say. So that's why I think it ends with just wait, and I think that's a stronger lyric rather than wait for me.
Yeah, just like that statement of wait, right? Because I think you can look at that as being like, is he talking to this imaginary person or is he talking to himself in that case? I think you can read it both ways.
And we talked about how this song is fear put in song, and I think that weight at the end, it's like, yeah, he's very fearful of being in a serious relationship. He doesn't say wait for me. He just says wait.
Yeah, like,
because I'm not ready.
Like, have the whole world wait, right? So he can catch up.
Yeah.
I don't know if it necessarily matters so much, but I appreciate the interpretation that the different performers have on these lyrics in particular. So Dean Jones has a very distinct like break between when he goes through the run of like my blue-eyed Sarah, warm Joanne, sweet Jenny, loving Susan, crazy Amy. So he's doing almost like a slight pause between every one. But Raúl Esparza almost has a run-on sentence. Like there's no pause. It's him going,
my blue-eyed Sarah, warm Joanne, sweet Jenny, loving Susan, crazy Amy.
Like it's like all in one breath that he does that run.
Yeah, again, and because that's what he wants. He wants a person with
all of that, right? That's what I was going to point out. Is like I like the idea of it being like this is all one person that I'm actually talking about instead of like these separate people that I have a choice between. It's like no, I want all of them into one being somehow. Yeah.
And I love how he sings "Crazy Amy,"
right?
Like Raúl Esparza, yeah, crazy
Amy. Yeah, he goes up on the Amy bit. This is how the 2018 version does kind of this same thing here, which is, did I know him? Have I waited too long? Maybe so, but maybe so is he. My loyal Harry, loving Paul, cute Jamie, happy Peter, handsome Larry.
My loyal Harry, loving Paul, cute Jamie, happy Peter, handsome Larry.
That's how. That's what the run is in the.
They're very
version.
bland. They're very bland lyrics.
Yeah, the cute Jamie one is the interesting part, right? Because Amy, his the same character in the other versions, is continually referred to as like frantic and, well, in this case, crazy and stuff like that. And Jamie here, 3 or 4 times, is just referred to as cute, right? Yeah. So it's a very, very different character trait that they're focusing on.
Yeah. And again, bland.
Sure. Here's just a couple of last questions, I guess, that I have on my mind here. I guess it's going back to the thrust of this song, which is this existential dread, this fear that Bobby has had. I want to know personally from you, like, is this something that you've ever had to deal with? Is this something that you understand, I guess?
Yeah, again, I think that's why I didn't like Company back then when I first listened to it, because I still hadn't experienced a part of it. Sometimes you get to know what the show is about. You have to experience it in order to get it and to like it or not like it. Depends on how you view the thing. But yeah, of course, everyone is fearful, and the older you get, the more fearful you get, I believe. Even though you hope that the more you grow up, the less fear you feel. That's not true, because when you're young, you don't care about a thing. Right. But the more you grow up, the more you care and the more you fear. So yeah, the older I get, the more I relate to the show and to the songs specifically, because again, perfection doesn't exist, but we don't want to accept it. So you always try to find excuses for anything. You always try to find excuses not to feel fear. And this is beautiful. This is why I love the show so much, and this is why I love this song. Even though, again, it's not one of the most beautiful ones.
Right.
But it's very poignant. It's very in character. It's very relatable. Mm-hmm. So beautiful. Yeah.
I guess why I resonate with this song so much too. Like I've kind of mentioned it a few times in passing, but I mean, in this show he's turning 35, and I'm 36 now. But I remember turning 35 and being like, "Ugh, I'm Bobby's age. Why?" And having that distinct fear and dread kind of come over me. And it's true that you get into your head a whole lot because specifically like the lyric, like have I met her? Was I just not ready for this to happen? And did this pass me by? This also goes into, I think, this belief, this damaging belief in many ways that there is like the one out there, or there's like only the one soulmate in your entire life.
Yeah.
And if you don't grab your chance, and you'll never find happiness in your entire life, which is kind of damaging for a lot of people. But I can't lie and say that this isn't something that is kind of like on my mind, or at least in the back of my mind most of the day, which is just like, why has this not happened? And why is this, has it happened? Have I waited too long and it won't occur in my life? So that's where I sit sometimes.
Well, I think that the gist of this show, the whole show, is it's not happened yet. Mm-hmm. It doesn't happen.
Right.
If it's not happened to you so far, it will never happen. No, that's not the gist. The meaning of the show is it's not happened yet.
Well, so that makes me feel a little bit happier. So I just have to.
Oh, I'm happy.
I have to wait it out. The other interesting thing, which is, I think, very smart on Sondheim's part, because I think in another songwriter's hands, they would feel compelled to include some of the girlfriends' names in this song, and they don't show up at all. So the three other like girlfriends that you see throughout the show are not mentioned by name in this song. And I think
because he doesn't care.
Exactly. Like, this underscores the fact that these are fun times I'm having, but these are not the people I want to spend the rest of my life with. The wives that are in my life are the people that I can see as, fulfilling what I actually want.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm stretching it too much, but I think that he mentions the wives because they are like the forbidden fruit. Like, I want that because I can't get it.
Right.
I want them, but they are married, and I want them because they're married. Again, other excuses for not being able to challenge himself.
Well, yeah, I think that adds to what we see later on, right? Which is, I think you're right in saying he sees them not as objects. That's not what I want to say. Like, he sees them as the epitome of what he is striving for, but he also doesn't want to put in the work to get to that point. That's part of his failing as a person. And then when he has that moment where he's like, "You, me, and Amy, we should get married." Like that. Why don't we just get married? And she's like, "No, like that's not how this thing works. You need you don't just need some body. You need somebody in your life, right?"
Exactly.
So it's
that's a beautiful line.
I love that line too. It's like, that's perfect book writing right there.
Yeah.
So I guess overall thoughts here that you have, like, this is a favorite song of yours from this show.
Again, it's not the one I go to when I want to listen to some company, because again, you think too much when you listen to this song.
Right.
You think too much about yourself, and you don't want to think about yourself sometimes.
That's right.
It's one of my favorite songs because we've talked about it for like, what is it, an hour so far. It's one of the songs that Sondheim talks about in his book. The one that has to be there. The one that you can't cut from the show. Otherwise, the show falls and it doesn't make any sense.
I agree.
It's one of the.
This song exists so that when we get to those other few songs in the show, that I think that it just hits even more for you. Taking this out would actually have a pretty adverse effect on the rest of the show.
Yeah, because it tells a story. It tells a story of Bobby, and even though it's not a narrative song, it's an introspective song, but it tells the story, and it's a very, very beautiful song. Yeah. By the way.
Well, Federico, thank you so much for joining me here today. It is, I know, very early where you are. It's very late where I am. But
so we're even.
So we're very even. If people wanted to, can they follow you online anyway?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, and I think that Kyle will. You will link the profile to the description of the show, because otherwise spelling it would be too compelling for me because it's very early. So You can find me there if you want, and you can reach out to me, and we can have a conversation as well.
Perfect. Great. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. You can email the show at puttingittogetherpodcast@gmail.com, and you can follow @Sondheim Podcast on Twitter or Instagram. And you can now support the show on Patreon by going to patreon.com/puttingittogetherpodcast. Thanks to the Alberta Podcast Network and to ATB this week. Putting It Together is available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, and pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts from. Consider subscribing so you never miss an episode. And if you are an iPhone user, if you can rate and or review the show in Apple Podcasts, that is one of the best things you can do so that this show reaches more people. Next week, we'll be talking about another 100 people in this economy. As always, a big thanks to the great Chris Taniguchi, who designed the podcast artwork, and Nick Driscoll for composing our theme music. For now, we've reached the end of our episode. Yes, I know. Goodbye for now. By the way, the song that I think about first with company is, of course, TikTok. That's the go-to song.
Oh yeah, the one, the good one.
The one good one, yeah.
Yeah, the one that every revival puts on.